go to the doctor, and how often are you asked, like, how many times are you breathing per minute?
Yeah.
Or what's your Bolt score? Like, what's your tolerance to CO2? Like, and not unless you go in there and say that you cannot breathe or you're having breathing difficulties that they assess that, failing to realize that your breath is the only system in the body you control. And when you control that, you control and talk to every other system in your body too.
Yeah.
It starts there. When we teach people how to breathe better, you want to look at it from 3 distinct pillars as biochemical, meaning like your tolerance to CO2, biomechanical, making sure that your breathing muscles, like your diaphragm, is working properly, that you're not breathing into your chest, that you're breathing really light, and then cadence, the speed of your breath.
Welcome to the Thriving Workplace Podcast,
the show that empowers your workplace to make a positive impact on your people, teams, and the entire organisational community.
Whether you're an employee, manager, or executive, we've got something for you.
Dive into inspiring ideas, practical tips, and meaningful conversations about employee wellbeing.
We're your hosts, Lauren and Jason, passionate workplace wellbeing champions from the Workplace Performance and Wellbeing Institute.
Join us as we bring in renowned experts and thoughtful leaders to share their wisdom, experiences, and innovative approaches to building a thriving workplace. Welcome back to another episode of the Thriving Workplace Podcast. This week, we're joined by not one, but 2 very awesome guests. We've got Chris Payten and Shani Marie on the podcast today, and they are a dynamic duo in the world of breathwork. They are transforming countless lives through their unique approach. Now, if we were to dive just into Chris, he's a trauma-informed life coach and master breathwork facilitator and guided thousands through powerful journeys of healing and self-discovery. His personal transformation in 2021 sparked a profound breathwork experience and all led him to pioneer one of the most comprehensive breathwork certification programs in the country. And then if we were to dive into Shani, she is a passionate breathwork facilitator and women's empowerment coach and specializes in helping women break through from anxiety. And her journey began in 2018 with a single breathwork session, and that provided what felt like years of therapy in just 45 minutes. Together, they have co-founded Infinity Training and Coaching, where Shani plays a vital role in business operations, and Chris is just the main man. Chris and Shani are on a mission to impact 1 million lives through the power of breathwork. But what I love most about these 2 amazing human beings is they just light up any room they walk into. Their jokes, their love, and just their presence is amazing. So please welcome to the Thriving Workplace Podcast, Chris and Shani. Hello.
Hey guys, that was probably the best intro I've ever had.
And what an intro. Like, I sound like a rad human.
You guys are rad.
Yeah, 100%.
You probably need a glass of water after that, Jace.
That was amazing. I love it. So good.
Well, thanks both of you for being on here. And I'd really love to start the podcast by, giving our listeners a little bit of context. I know Jason started that, but let's start, where did your journeys begin and how have you ended up where you are now?
You go first, darling. It started for you in 2018.
It did. So I was actually on the tail end of an abusive relationship, and I flew over to Perth at this time in 2018, and I was just having a girls' getaway. I was like, I need to get away. I need to be with the girls. I just want to hang out. I wanted to drink as well, I'll be honest. And my friend was like, let's go to this breathwork thing. And she told me it was a meditation, kind of like a meditation. And for anyone listening who has done breathwork, it is anything but a meditation. And I went in there with this expectation to just kind of relax and in my head kind of have a nap too. And I ended up having these huge trauma releases and everything from my past, all of the stuff that was happening with my abusive relationship that I was on the tail end of. It was all just flooding out of me in the most extraordinary ways. And when I came out of that session, like I often say, I would have looked like an electrified cat. However, I felt incredible. I felt so free and relaxed and quiet. Like my mind was quiet for the first time in what felt like years since I was a child. And I got really curious and I just kept following that and realizing I got more out of that than I had in years of therapy. I'd done psychology, just typical types of therapy, talk therapies. And it's like, there is something in this and I need to know more. And at that time, it was still so new that it was quite hard to find information without doing a facilitator training. And so I went into a facilitator training without any intention of being a facilitator. I just wanted to learn. I wanted to know the science and you know, the woo-woo. I wanted to know, like, what happens here? Where do I go? Like, what does my brain do? And I did my facilitator training and then just got really passionate and wanted to give this to everyone because, again, in years of talk therapy, I didn't have the relief like I did in 45 minutes of that first session. And so then I started doing workshops and went down the path of also healing my body and my trauma with sexuality, and then got even more passionate about that. And I'm like, far out. Every woman needs this. At that time, I was really focused on women. And whilst I still am very focused on women, there's also a big piece in men learning about this too and having this for themselves too. And then I met Chris, long story short, and we built our facilitator training that gets to serve everybody. And so I'm passionate about speaking and sharing my story and message for women to show women that anything is possible and you can do anything and be anything and get over anything. And then the vehicle, the mission of impacting 1 million lives with breathwork is for everybody. It's for the globe. Together, that's what we do.
I guess I fell into it a few years later, actually. 2021 was my first experience. And, you know, similar to Shani, I actually had a mental breakdown at 25. And it was probably the hardest time in my life, if I'm honest, and probably the scariest time. You know, I really did hit rock bottom. I was a father of two very young kids. I was going through a separation and I totally lost myself. And I was trying lots of different things, you know, talk therapy. I was doing everything, healers, you know, psychics, you know, everything you could imagine. I'd tried it. And it wasn't until I got a tip off to go to like a breathwork experience, actually up the sunny coast. And I remember driving up there that day just being like, I really hope this helps. Like, I really hope this helps. By that point, I'd checked myself into hospital twice with suicidal ideation. And I was honestly running out of hope. Like, I couldn't really see the light. And I went to this workshop and it was very interesting. We did a lot of interesting things there. And we got to the breathwork part and they're like, right, we're going to breathe for 40 minutes. I'm like, okay, cool. They're like, hard, deep, faster than you've ever before. I'm like, okay, no worries. And within 10 minutes of that, I started to feel all these sensations come over my body. I was tingling, my body was shaking and vibrating. And I started to feel like this surge of emotion come up. And I reckon it was about 10 minutes in, I was catapulted back to all these really painful memories that I had during my upbringing. I grew up around a lot of drugs, domestic violence, crime, abuse, and just really poor mental health and instability. And there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't processed as a child. And then, you know, it was coming out in my adult life. I was very dysregulated, very anxious, struggling with mental health. And for the remaining 30 minutes of that journey, I just basically sobbed. I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed, and my body just released. And similar to Shani, I was like, how did this happen? And what is this? I'm also very curious. For those who do know me, like, I go very deep on anything that I'm interested in and I learn it like an encyclopedia. And at the time I was in a PT career. I was already working with people, 10 years in that space, coaching people. And I thought, you know, I wanted to go further and help people in a deeper way. So long story short, I actually started breathwork with a previous company I was in. I was running some trainings, and then I met Shani at a totally different type of training. She just so happened to be a breathwork facilitator too. Go figure. We hit it off, and yeah, about 4 months ago, we thought, well, how do we change 1 million lives minimum with this magic? And like, well, we have to teach people. We have to certify people, and, you know, bring more people to the breathwork space, because it is commonly associated with being very spiritual, hippie, or woo-woo, or left field, and it is not that at all. There is so much science behind it, and it is for the everyday person, and that's really what we're doing. We're bringing it to a middle ground where we don't care who you are, where you're from, left field, right field, it's for you, and we can help you.
I love that. I want to touch on, Shani, you said before that your very first breathwork facilitation and your first experience of this, you were going in there thinking it was a meditation. Could you touch on, for our listeners, what's the difference between a meditation and then a breathwork?
So a meditation, typically they do incorporate slow breathing practices, right? To downregulate your nervous system, to calm you and put you into that rest and digest state. Typically though, when you go to a breathwork event where they're doing a more trauma style release, it's very common to have holotropic style breathwork at those types of events. How do I explain it? It brings your energy up so much that it takes you out of your head into your body, and your body gets the opportunity to let go and release. So you're somatically releasing stored trauma in your body. So you can be shaking, you can be tingling, your body can be moving in all weird and wonderful ways, and you don't know how it's happening, and it's probably never even happened for you in your life. And so it's taking it from a meditation where you're sitting very still, you're in a rest state, and then coming into a more somatic releasing style form of breathwork practice where your body is moving and letting go and releasing. So there, for me, was a lot of movement. Some people do get that relaxation at a holotropic breath. Sometimes they really just go into a state where they feel like they leave their body, where they feel like they go to God or see God, and they're just very relaxed. And as a facilitator, sometimes you just see them just moving their arms really slow or their hands really slow. And then you get some people who do have that more trauma release where they are letting go and moving vigorously, and sound is coming out of them in different ways. So it's kind of like the differences, and to paint a visual of that.
And we'd like to know a little bit more about maybe the science behind breathwork. Like, it's becoming a bit trendy now, people sort of talking about it, but what's actually the sort of physiological benefits? Why should the listeners be interested in doing this? Instead of the woo-woo side, how can we sort of maybe apply it to like a corporate worker that I know would probably be listening to this episode right now?
Yeah, I think what's important to note is that breathwork is an umbrella statement, and it sort of there's a diverse range of ways to breathe. And when you breathe in different sorts of ways and different sorts of speed, it changes the state of your nervous system. So like when you asked the previous question before around like, well, what's the difference between meditation and breathwork? Well, breathwork's really just a conscious practice, right? It's being in the process a lot more. You could slow breathe and you could fast breathe. And when you slow breathe, typically what happens is the slower the breath, the lighter the breath, and the longer the exhale will put you into more of a parasympathetic state, which is going to rest, digest, relax you, ground you, which would be great, if you're under a lot of stress, if you're, feeling anxious, if you're feeling angry, all these sorts of things to wind you down. But we can also use our breath to wind up too. And there's times where we need that. I'm sure that some of the listeners right now might be thinking, there's definitely times in my life where I feel a bit flat, unmotivated, potentially I'm laying on the couch, I've got so much stuff to do, but I can't seem to do it, I'm procrastinating. You can use your breath to switch states. So, we like to say it's almost like the remote control to your nervous system. And when you make sense of how to use it, you're not really stuck anywhere anymore. And, we're seeing a lot of benefits to people that I guess they work with their mindsets a lot, and, they try to change the way they think to change the way they feel. But the problem is that if we're not actually addressing someone's physiology and their body, then this is only going to do so much. We've got a deeper issue happening here. We've got nervous system dysregulation happening. And so it's really just about teaching people, hey, like you've got the tool, which is your breath. Yeah. And if you do it this way, you'll get this. And if you do it this way, you'll get this.
Oh, I love that. It's something that we have, literally every day. But I think people forget to utilize this thing and we take it for granted, the breath. And it is so powerful. Sure.
Yeah. If someone was to utilize it, let's just say someone right now is listening, they're sitting at their desk, they've got their headphones in and they're thinking, okay, I'm a little bit flat at the moment, like you said. How could they use their breath to pump themselves up to get through the next 3 hours of work?
Yeah, great question. Coming back to what I said before, so typically faster breathing will put you into more of what's called a sympathetic state. So when you increase the speed of the breath, you'll turn on the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight system. And what's going to happen in the short term is you're going to get a small amount of adrenaline dumping into your body, which is going to, get you going. It's going to get the focus happening. That will only last short term though. And this is another thing that we're really passionate about is it's not just delivering these really transformational breathwork sessions. It's teaching people the physiology of their breathing and how to breathe better every day for their health. So whilst you could breathe really fast and get it's almost like an e-shot of energy, right? It might work for the moment. Over the long term, what we really need to do is we need to teach people to breathe less. Because when we breathe less, we actually allow our body to be oxygenated more. It's quite interesting. There's a whole science behind it. I'm not sure if you want me to go into it today, but it all depends on your carbon dioxide tolerance. So CO2 is actually the gas that allows oxygen to get into your cells. So if you're feeling flat, that means that your brain's needing some energy. Now, if you're over breathing and you're dumping all of that CO2 out, the oxygen that you are breathing in is not actually moving into your cells to recreate that energy. So by doing some simple breath holds or breath reduction styles of training, we can actually raise the ceiling of CO2, and in turn, oxygen floods into your cells and recreates energy at a much more efficient rate.
Yeah, so interesting. I feel like we think we need to breathe more. Oh, we're not getting enough oxygen to the brains. We need to breathe more. But people as a whole are quite stressed and we're shallow breathing. We're not actually utilizing our whole capacity to breathe. Like I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, so I understand all of that side of things, maybe not breath work as such, but it's quite interesting. And I read the book, The Breath or Breathe by James Nestor.
Great book.
That one, right? But that was my favorite.
Yeah, it's just behind me.
Yeah. And listeners need to listen to that or listen to an audio or read that book because it's so interesting, the science behind it and how you can utilize the power of breath every single day. And
absolutely.
how breath really, controls your health, really, and your health outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like go to the doctor, and how often are you asked, like, how many times are you breathing per minute?
Yeah.
Or what's your BOLT score? Like, what's your tolerance to CO2? Like, and not unless you go in there and say that you cannot breathe or you're having breathing difficulties that they assess that, failing to realize that your breath is the only system in the body you control. And when you control that, you control and talk to every other system in your body too.
Yeah.
It starts there.
Even if you go into the doctors for a respiratory thing, they don't even really check how you're breathing. Or like Chris said, do a BOLT test or anything like that.
Yeah.
They go and check your hook you up to a heart monitor or do all these other tests on your vital organs, which is great. But they don't actually ask you how your breathing is. And if we go back to school, we're also, even as adults a little bit now, CO2 is a dangerous gas, right? And so then we create the story that if we have too much CO2 in us, that's bad.
It's a paradox because too much of it in the body is poisonous.
Yeah.
But if we don't have it, we're also not benefiting from the oxygen that we're breathing in.
That's right.
It's very interesting. And when we teach people how to breathe better, you want to look at it from three distinct pillars as biochemical, meaning like your tolerance to CO2, biomechanical, making sure that your breathing muscles, like your diaphragm is working properly, that you're not breathing into your chest, that you're breathing really light, and then cadence, the speed of your breath. And most people are over breathing. I had a really funny, I don't know if you'd call it I didn't even get the chance to have an online argument with this dude. He deleted his comment straight away. But I posted this reel and I was like, if you're breathing beyond 8 to 12 times per minute at rest, you're over breathing. And he's like, I'm a paramedic. It's 12 to 16 times, blah, blah, blah. And I went to get on and I wanted to say to him, the data that we're pulling these stats from is literally given by sick overbreathing people.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we're getting the data from. But he deleted his comment before I could get to him. But, just as a general rule of thumb, these are great ways that right now at home, you can start to assess your breathing. You could go, okay, well, if I just start a timer for 60 seconds, how many breath cycles do I take in that time? And just know that the higher that rate, the more activity of your sympathetic nervous system is going to be happening. You're going to be kicking yourself into a stress response all day long without even realizing it.
That was the biggest game changer for me with anxiety, because that's been my journey with it, with anxiety, and learning how to just breathe in different ways. And it always includes a breath hold.
Yeah.
There's always some sort of holding of my breath to help with my anxiety, as opposed to breathing more, or just like breathe deep. Yeah, that's great. But what happens when I hold is so much more powerful and effective for these things. And ultimately our big vision is to make breathwork so mainstream that when you do go to the doctor and you're experiencing anxiety, depression, all these things, a BOLT score test is included in the testing, in the questions before they go and put you on
benzos.
Yeah. I was like, how do I say this in a nice way, but stuff it on medications, right? And then again, taking it even further, making it so mainstream that it is a part of every typical therapy that you get prescribed, into psychology, into counseling, into all talk therapies.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting that you brought up, Chris, about the paramedic, because I was trained as a paramedic, and then they teach you that the rest rate is 12 to 16 breaths per minute. So when I was doing my training, I thought that was normal. Then I remember reading that book and I was like, oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, true. And then I'm like trying to breathe 16 times a minute. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And then I was messaging a friend that I trained with, and I was like, this is insane that you're literally testing people's breath rate. And if it was 6 or 8 a minute, they're alarmed. They're putting them on oxygen.
That's right.
They're giving them more oxygen, which is actually so toxic for the body if you're actually over oxygenating, which kills like so much of your tissues and like does so much damage.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, like breathing in itself, like every time you breathe, you create free radicals in your body.
Exactly.
Right? Like you create free radicals which are damaging to the body. And it's crazy. Like it's craziness. At the end of the day, most people are sitting around 95 to 99% oxygen saturation at any given time.
Yeah.
So the thing is that you don't need more oxygen. You need more CO2 to make that oxygen do its thing. That's what you need.
It's crazy. And why do you think it is then, in your opinion, and you can be as honest as you want on this podcast, that we're not taught this, that the facts are wrong, right?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that we're not really taught that I think we should be taught, particularly in the education system. Breathing, one of them. Emotional intelligence, another one. Money, another one. For whatever reason, we don't get these things taught to us. I don't know. For some reason, they thought that algebra was more fucking important than breathing well. Who knows? But at the end of the day, I'm using my breath more than that shit. So I don't know. I think that it's one of those things that it just happens, right? Breathing just happens, and it's not something we have to think about, thank goodness, because we would have to really pay attention thousands of times a day. Because it just happens, and because I guess we take it for granted, it's not this thing that we typically pay any attention to unless it's problematic. And humans are like this in general. Like unless there's some pain or some discomfort or some resistance somewhere, we don't really look at things, right? Because everything's just fine and dandy. And so for me, I guess I was always more aware of it because I grew up with a very athletic background. I was always involved with sport. But even the way, like looking back now, even the way I was taught to breathe during exercise was completely wrong. Completely wrong. And I could have got so much more out of my training if I had learnt how to breathe better, back then. Which I'm grateful that we can pass that on to people now. Because we do see a lot of like PTs come through our training, instructors, yoga instructors, athletes. And I've had the pleasure of going and working with some professional sporting teams, and, even their strength and conditioning coaches for top NRL teams had no fucking clue what I was talking about. It's crazy.
It's a game changer, that one. Like if I reflect on when I was doing cross country at school, they tell you to breathe through your mouth. When your heart rate goes up, to keep you going, make sure you and like doing it in that way. But then learning about breath and nasal breathing and actually not breathing through the mouth. And then me now, I'm kind of going through a bit of a training regime, I suppose, where I'm actually running with the dogs and running more with nasal breathing. And the recovery is so much faster. I'm not actually like, I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to slow down. I'm getting to the point where I want to gasp for air. And so I just take a minute, I slow it down, and it's quick, it's effective, I feel amazing. And also as well, in the past, I used to have the belief that I couldn't run in winter because there was something wrong with me because I was breathing through my mouth and it hurts. My lungs ached. And I even remember saying to my old PTs in the past, like, I can't actually do this in winter. It hurts me. There's something wrong and I just don't do it. And so I didn't do it. But now I know it's actually breathing in the wrong way. So now when I do train in winter and I am running and I'm nasal breathing, it's effortless.
I love how you did bring up that nasal breathing, because last year when I did start running for the very first time. Now, I'm not a runner at all, but I was doing that mouth breathing. And then Lauren goes, how come you're so puffed out? I was like, I don't know. I'm just not a runner. That's what I labeled myself as. But I was like, oh, no, I'm going to push through. And it wasn't until I spoke to my mentor about that. And he goes, well, why don't you just try breathing through your nose? And straight away, the speed went up, the distance went up. And then, like I said, the recovery time, I was ready to go again that afternoon. Not that I did, but
But you're ready.
But you were
ready.
ready.
I was ready for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So we were talking before at how, a breathwork journey, essentially. What does a breathwork journey look like compared to just the everyday breathing? What's a breathwork journey look like?
This is it's hard. It is my favorite part of the breathwork world. It's amazing and beautiful all in one. With a journey, this is typically where you'll see like faster breathing patterns. The point of this is, like, we say that like trauma gets released from your body. So that's true. And it's also tension as well. Yeah. So the purpose of one of these breathwork experiences is to essentially get out of the human monkey mind and allow our more primitive parts of our brain, like our reptilian mammalian brain, to process any unprocessed emotions and discharge stored tension. So what happens as a human or in a mammal in general is that when we enter like a stressful situation or a traumatic situation, our nervous system shifts into fight or flight, right? So it detects the threat. And immediately what happens is we go through something called hyperarousal, and we get really on, right? Because there's a threat and we've got all this energy coursing through our body because we're supposed to be mobilized by it. So we're supposed to either fight or flight. And if you look at what animals do in the wild, they really just honor this. They honor the natural cycle of their nervous system because they don't have a human brain, and they either fight or they flight, and then they get on with their life. But as humans, we kind of do things a bit differently, and we have a thinking brain.
We want to think about
which gets in the way. And when we don't use that energy, so if we sit still, if we don't discharge it, it gets stored in the system. And, the saying goes, like, your body keeps the score. Over time, unprocessed stress loops and trauma loops will store, and they will store, and they will store, and they'll wreak havoc on the body and the mind. So what happens in one of these breathwork experiences, once you breathe to a certain point at a certain speed, knowing now what we know about CO2, if you're dumping a lot of that out, it means that your brain is temporarily getting a reduction of oxygen. And as that happens, the activity in the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, really downregulates. And then what happens is then the body kicks in, and the body knows what to do. And it starts to release and discharge and get rid of or complete the cycle on the things that didn't get to 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 years ago, maybe at your childhood. And so what's actually happening is you're just allowing your nervous system to do what it's always known how to, but without the human brain in the way. And that's really the science to it. There's so much backing it up. We know how it happens in the brain now. We know what happens in the body. And, people are finding so much relief without even having to talk about it because, talking about things and rehashing over things, our brains don't know the difference between what's real and what's not. And so often traditional talk therapy, if it's not done well, can quite literally keep people going through the process as if it's happening again. So, that's where we see breathwork really, making a big difference in people's lives. And it's not uncommon for people to say, like, man, I feel so light. Like that's been better than years worth of other help that I've tried. Yeah.
I have a few questions on that because I'm assuming if I want to know the answers, the listeners are going to want to know the answers. Is there any sort of people, any populations that shouldn't do breath work? Is there any circumstances that breath work's not safe for them? And how often should you do these sorts of things? Is there only this much, or what would you say to those questions?
Great question. Yes, with that type of breathing, there is contraindications. So things like pregnancy is a no-go. They rule out, and they tell you to be aware of things like high blood pressure, any sort of heart conditions, panic disorders, any sort of like bipolar, things like this, where mood can be quite unstable. If you're on sort of mood stabilizers, epilepsy, pretty sure that's all of them. Anything else? Respiratory conditions as well. So
that's typically for a holotropic breathing if it's in through the mouth.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's basically just going like what's happening to the nervous system. So whether it's through the mouth, through the nose, the speed is the most important thing to think about.
Right.
So we've had people come in before and literally sign themselves off and go, I have epilepsy and I'm doing it anyway. I've signed the waiver. I'm like, well, look, it's your body. You've signed the waiver. We advise you not to. And they've been fine. We also don't want to say, go do it if you have that. Okay. So just be aware of those things. With slow breathing, 0 contraindications. In fact, 30% of the population are over breathing. Everyone needs to learn to breathe less. So there's 0 contraindications to that. Slow breathing, do it daily, like multiple times a day. Check in all the time. With one of those styles of sessions, when I do one, I probably don't need one for another month at least, like a proper full one. Yeah. You could do it on like a weekly basis, but I definitely wouldn't say more than that.
Yeah.
I would look at it as more of like a prescription. So if you're someone who wants to go through releasing a lot of trauma, or you really want to get over something that's quite deep within you, a good breathwork facilitator, in my opinion, gets to prescribe, okay, so over 3 sessions, we're going to work on this and we're going to go through a journey together over a certain amount of sessions. So it's more of a prescription as opposed to a daily practice.
Yeah, okay.
But then like slow breathing, it, like Chris said, it's for everyone. And my challenge to anyone that I speak to, anyone listening to me ever, is in the morning when you wake up, your natural cortisol levels rise. And so instead of having your morning coffee or your morning cacao or something that is activating your body even more, do a slow breathing practice instead and allow your body to just naturally do its rhythm in the morning. Then have your stimulants later around lunchtime or after lunchtime. And just notice the difference in your body and your nervous system just by implementing that.
Then we talked a lot about breath work and how it can help a person and an individual. But if an organization is listening to this, maybe a business owner, and they're thinking about their teams, what would you say to them? How can they maybe help their teams? How's it even beneficial to bring that into the workplace?
Oh, I love that.
One of the things that you really, the key things that we're looking for in an organization is productivity, number one, right? And as a team, making sure everyone's getting along, because that helps with productivity. So there's a massive upside to both productivity focus, but also emotional regulation when you're breathing well, and stress management. And all of these things come up no matter what occupation you're in, right? So whether you're a business owner, whether you're involved in corporation, whether you work for someone, it's going to be there. I think that it needs to be implemented into more organizations on a daily basis. I would go as far as saying daily, whether you start your day with a breathing practice as a team, and not just some like random breathing practice, like a science-backed breathing practice that's really going to help you reduce the amount of times you're breathing, enhance your focus, and make you feel nice and calm. Because, most times we're sitting in front of computers all day, right? And that's quite stimulating too. So I notice myself when I've been in front of the computer for too long, I get to this point where I'm like, oh my God, like this is like, I need to get away from this thing. My head is like on fire. My vision's gone blurry. I'm over breathing. And you don't really realize you're doing it because you're so engrossed in your work. You're so focused, you're just getting it done, and your breathing pace is picking up. So, starting every day with a slow breathing technique, same as like, in the morning. But also just giving people a little bit of education around, the breath being the remote control. It's like, hey guys, like if you need an afternoon pick me up, like let's just do some rapid fire breathing for a little bit. This is how we do it. Do it as a team. Encourage it as, a morale building exercise as well. It's really fun, and it's funny as when everyone's like breathing together. It's just, it lifts the spirits of people too.
We actually do it at our Beyond Your Breath event. We get them doing that together. We partner them up and make it a really funny experience. And it brings people together. And one of the things that I learned years ago, I don't know if this is still a thing, but Oprah Winfrey.
Well, I was thinking about her.
Yeah, of course. She, when she comes into her office, when everyone starts their day, they don't just get into their work. They come into the room, they all sit in a big circle, they do some breathing, they do a meditation, they open up to share. So it's like, does anyone need to get anything off their chest? Is everyone feeling okay? If you're not, they have the opportunity to express, to just get it out. Then once that's complete, they start their day. And I think that is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually feel like if businesses had that, so it's like if you start at 9, you're in the office at 8:30 and you go, okay, get in, park, get your stuff at your desk, then everyone come into whatever room, the boardroom, meeting room, and we're all going to sit around and we're just going to breathe together. Then we're going to have just a moment of mindfulness and open up if anyone just needs any support. You know, and I think about with women, we go through a change every week with our cycle. And so even just having the awareness that women are going to feel differently every day of the week when they come in. So even just having the opportunity to go, hey, I just started my bleed today. I feel like freaking shit. And just having that opportunity to just be open and go, okay, cool. Do you need any support today? You know, and just having that open. Or like, you know, a guy's come in and he's just separated from his family. It's like, I'm just going through the separation. I might just be a bit this today. Just letting you all know. Cool. Do you need support? You know, and just having that as your business foundation, I think is so important, because it's one thing to have a business and to have staff, but you also want to create a thriving ecosystem so that your business thrives as well. And I think breath work, mindfulness, connection, they're 3 big things that you can implement into any business, especially corporate, when you've got big things happening that will really keep your business and your staff thriving.
Wow, sign me up to one of those.
I even think like the medical system, like as a paramedic, imagine having that before you start your shift and when you end your shift. Because if you look at paramedic, like for anything first responders, like fire, all those things, you are dealing with stuff that you don't normally see. And, you know, PTSD is on the rise in so many different ways. And one of the number one is like in the medical industry, people who leave that and then just go back out into the real world in the army, right? Like if you have more of this in the world, you're giving people tools and ways to regulate themselves, to feel connected, to be okay to be with their families and in society after experiencing things that we are just not really meant to see.
It's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on the podcast today. If people wanted to find out more about yourself, Chris, about you, Shani, or about your trainings, where could they go and find you?
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best place to find us. We're on there the most. My handle's at Chris Payten, and Shani's is
underscroll. Yours has an underscroll at the end.
What? It's actually an underscore at the end. Yes, Chris Payten.
It will be in the show notes.
Yeah. Shani's on Instagram as well. Our company, Infinity Training and Coaching, is also on Instagram. You can also find us on Google if you want to search us up. We have a website, all the information about our trainings. And yeah, that's the best place to go, I reckon.
Yeah, Instagram, we're always on Instagram. You know, you can DM us there and we are always up for a chat. We love it.
Amazing. So if anyone listening, you know, has any questions, I'm sure they can approach you guys and ask you questions over Instagram. That would be beautiful. And well, there's one last question that we ask every single one of these guests. So before we finish, we need to ask you the question of, if you had 60 seconds of advice, you can both do it together or separate, doesn't matter, to anyone listening right now. Now, it can be something that we've spoken about or something completely different and out of this conversation. What would you say?
You are not what goes on in your head. You are not what goes on in your head, and your head will lie to you a lot. And that's hard to sit in because, you know, there's a lot of noise that goes on inside there, but you shouldn't listen to all of it. And the reason I say this is because most people need a bit more nervous system regulation in their life because they are dysregulated. And when your body's dysregulated, so is your mind. And so don't pay too much attention to your mind. Pay attention to your body first, and just know that you are not your thoughts.
That was beautifully said. I'm just going to... No, I think that was perfect. He wrapped that up in a nice bow.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode.
If you got value from this episode, it would mean the world to us if you could take 20 seconds out of your day and leave a 5-star rating and written review.
And remember, you have the power to make a lasting change in your workplace.